Hey, good morning. And let me be one of the first to wish you a happy 2022. Now, as mentioned, we are going to be starting off this year with a series on the fundamentals of what makes us you, the 8 principles that we all agree to. So, one thing that we all agree upon is the worth of human life. I remember in university learning about Immanuel Kant and his focus on the deontological ethics. My professor explained it like this. Imagine somebody walking along a lake alone, wearing a particularly expensive suit or a pair of shoes. They happen to see a child drowning in the lake, and what should they do about it? Well, a moral person wouldn't hesitate to save a human life, even if it meant ruining their favorite pair of shoes. There's no suit that costs more than what a human life costs, even if it's a stranger. Now, I think that I've lived a particularly fortunate life, but I've known for a while that I have a lot of privileges that many others lack, and so I've tried really hard to notice them. I know, for instance, that I'll never quite understand what it means to be on the wrong side of racism or misogyny. Decentering whiteness and masculinity would prove to be tough for me, but poverty is something that can happen to anyone, especially in America. In the USA, you can have $1 million and a 6-figure income, and then you can lose your job and lose the house and be out on the street. So I started by focusing on helping the unhoused, because it was easier to see myself in them. When I was in college, I organized a fundraiser drive for local homelessness shelters in the city. Did it together with some of the men in the business and the philosophy schools. We would grow out our beards for the whole month of November and have people sponsor us. We called it No Shavember, and all the money that we raised we would give to these 2 different homeless shelters that I'd found in the city. It was a lot of fun. We were growing scruff for those who've got it tough. At the end, we all, looked terrible, but felt great about it. I know that different people had different ideas about supporting charities, and some people want to support the biggest charity because they know that there's the lowest administrative overhead and the most money, they'll be able to stretch the dollar further. And so there is one that's funded millions of dollars a year and has corporate sponsors, and then there's the other one that was really doing everything on a shoestring budget and just doing the best that they could with what they had. So the same amount of money given to them would mean a lot more. And so I wanted people to have the chance to choose. I wanted for people to not get hung up about whether the charity they were giving to was the kind of charity that they like, but just that it would go towards helping people. That makes sense? One of the shelters that we gave a check to, it was enough to cover their operating expenses for a week and a half. And I asked the other guy, what are you guys going to use this money for? And he said, toiletry kits. I was like, really? He says, yeah, we're going to buy razors. In a karmic turn of events, maybe 2 years later, while I was still a student, I found myself unhoused. I was between one lease expiring right before the next one began. So it only lasted a week, and I was relatively safe. I was couch surfing for a lot of the time, but I did spend one night in the Good Shepherd shelter, which is one of the shelters that I donated to. I can remember being shaken down for drugs and weaponry, being told the rules about how I can't, leave and come back. I remember the lack of privacy and the distrustful glances over my shoulders. This was a place that was full of desperate people. And I didn't know anybody's drug habits or what traumas they brought in with them. And I wasn't used to being treated like I was a half step away from being a criminal myself. And it really put me on high alert. And so I kept my distance in there, and I just sort of waited out my sentence, and I tried not to be recognized. And then I folded these moments of fear and derision I had into my understanding. But here's the thing that I got wrong about the inherent worth and dignity of people. It's not these grand gestures. It's not about jumping into a lake to save a drowning person. It's not about cutting a huge check to a homelessness shelter. There's more to treating a person like an end in themselves. It's these smaller ways that we show that a person is loved instead of just tolerated. Ta-Nehisi Coates is a scholar of anti-racism and the history of racism in America. And he said this: racism is not merely a simplistic hatred. It is more often broad sympathy towards some and broad skepticism toward others. And I'd extend this concept to oppression of all kinds, including around our understandings of ability and gender. So even though I was trying to love my neighbors and to be one of them, I still treated them with skepticism, and I held them at an arm's length. So now I work full-time with our unhoused neighbors. So 5 to 6 times a week, I look people in the eyes. I listen to their stories. I make personal relationships with people that don't get that kind of treatment every single day. And I see them being in community with each other and inviting me into that community. The people that are left behind by capitalism, the folks who have nothing else, they fall back on each other because that's all they have. There's the man with the rollator that he keeps strapped to the top of his van, and he brings donuts every week to the drop-in program where there's already plenty of free food, but just because he wants everyone to have something sweet. He spends his own food stamps on it, just to show that he cares. Or there's the man who's endured racism for all of his life, but he gifted me this small token for Christmas, reminding me that he was willing to share a little of something that he loved, that we bonded over. He carries all of his belongings in 2 backpacks. And he has a bad back, and he's slightly younger than my dad is, but he treats me like an equal. And he inquires about my weekend and my holiday plans. So in the year 2020, when we all had to learn how to restructure our lives and to care for each other differently, we had to learn the new rules about how to keep each other safe and cared for, I was able to learn the greater meaning of this inherent worth and dignity. This is when we all dusted off our sewing machines to make homemade masks for each other. It's when we pulled together to keep making community worship services happen, to give each other hope. It's when I felt sick and the caring committee showed up on my doorstep with a hot dinner. It's when people prayed for me while I was a political prisoner. Racists don't just burn crosses on lawns or lynch people. It's a racist action to assume that a person of another color is not smart enough to do something that they've learned how to do. A misogynist isn't just the man who steals a woman's idea and claims the credit for his own. Also to blame are the people who stood by and watched it happen and didn't say anything about it. We can be better people than that. We just have to remember how best to love each other. We already know how. And that's why we come to church, to learn to love each other better. So let's resolve this year to strip those broad skepticisms out of our minds and to fold in broader sympathies. Let's resolve to embrace and embody these principles. And now for your closing hymn today, please welcome the Justice Collective with He's Not Heavy, He's My Brother.